It's even more profound than that. If you injure your nerves and you kill your nerves in your arm, for example, your nerves will regenerate, grow back at 1 millimeter per day. It'll grow back amazingly, right? Which is why when you cut yourself, you might have a little numbness around there, but eventually you'll restore sensation for the most part because the nerves regenerate. Now, your gut regenerates pretty much every day, but some of your big organs can regenerate. If I took the liver, which is the largest organ in your body, and remove 2/3 of it, that 1/3 that will be left over the course of a few months to a year, the rest of the liver will regenerate, grow a new liver. If I cut off the tip of your lung, snip, all right, the tip of your lung will grow back. So our body's got the capability of regenerating. And what's exciting is that the foods that we eat can activate our stem cells, make more of them come out. And the reason this is important from a longevity perspective, from a vitality perspective, is because during aging, among many things that happen during aging, we get what's called stem cell exhaustion. Not only are the reservoirs depleted, there's less water in the well, so to speak, because it's been kicking out stem cells your whole life. So you got fewer stem cells, but the ones that are there are tired, exhausted. So there's two meanings to stem cell exhaustion. There's fewer stem cells as we get older into our the second or third chapters of our life, and the ones that are there are not as vigorous. And so foods as medicines can revitalize and repopulate our stem cells, which is pretty cool.
Hello, Dr. Lee. You are the author of 2 New York Times best-selling books on diet and nutrition, so Eat to Beat Disease and Eat to Beat Your Diet. So welcome to Modern Healthspan, and thank you so much for coming on our channel.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So I love your message about the power of food to help not only prevent, but also to fight diseases, because it kind of means that we have more control, perhaps, than we think, rather than having to wait for pharma to come up with solutions. And you talk about 5 kind of protectors that help sustain the body. And these can be modulated by food. So could you kind of introduce what those 5 are that you look at?
Sure. Well, first of all, a little bit about me. I'm a scientist and a physician who spent the last almost 30 years working to develop better treatments for human diseases, everything from cancer, diabetes, vision loss, heart disease, et cetera. And in the course of my nonprofit work through the Angiogenesis Foundation, we've been very fortunate to be successful. In fact, there have been 46 newly approved FDA drugs that actually are directed towards these very diseases: cancer, diabetic wound healing, prevention, and even reversal blindness. We're working on others as well. But in this course, this journey of developing better medical treatments, which is what I as a physician was trained to do, diagnose and treat disease for as long as needed, I started to realize that the biggest opportunity was to prevent disease in the first place, number 1, prevention, and number 2, to be able to leverage something that pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies spend billions of dollars doing, and yet similar solutions are hidden in plain sight all around us, which is in the foods that we eat, in our refrigerators, our pantries, and the local markets. And so what I was able to do was to use the same systems that are applied for drug development, some of which I helped to develop, and to test foods and extracts coming from whole foods, literally things that you would go to the local markets, the fresh broccoli, the fresh mushrooms, the fresh bell peppers, et cetera, and test them. And we would actually test them head to head in the same systems that drugs are developed. So that's truly food as medicine. So it's really because of this background that I already knew that there are systems in the body that drug developers are trying aggressively to try to address. Our circulation. I study angiogenesis, how the body protects its circulation. Well, you can fire pharmaceutical missiles at it, or remarkably, the eureka for me was to find foods that could actually also help control your circulation, your blood vessels in a natural way. Number two, are stem cells. I've been involved with many efforts with industry, billions of dollars spent, trying to develop stem cell therapies to treat heart disease, to reverse blindness, to help heal spinal cord injury, even in brain after stroke. It actually works, but not ready for prime time, probably many years, if not decades away from having a true drug for these. However, perhaps one of the most jaw-dropping discoveries that I made was that, in fact, foods can actually stimulate our body's own stem cells. You don't need to buy them from anyone else. You can actually mobilize, recruit your own stem cells and have them go to work inside your body to repair yourself from the inside out. That's a second health defense. Third is really our gut microbiome. And this originated a few years ago when I was working on wound healing. How do we grow better blood vessels to heal wounds that are difficult, like in diabetes or with bad atherosclerotic disease, peripheral arterial disease, etc.? And, the Holy Grail has always been to find something that can help improve healing. Lo and behold, a colleague of mine at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, actually was working on a probiotic, meaning a natural gut bacteria called Lactobacillus reuteri. And that set me off in this journey to look at that and other bacteria that's naturally found in our gut microbiome, which is our other third health defense system that naturally heals us by really being an incredible symphony of health orchestrators inside our gut, inside our large bowel primarily, but it's also they're also present elsewhere. Third health defense, and obviously gut microbes being powerfully influenced by food. Whatever we're feeding ourselves secondarily goes on to feed our gut microbiome. Fourth is our DNA, our genetic code. Now, I've been involved with gene therapy studies. In fact, gene therapy is quite amazing. I mean, there is an approved treatment for gene therapy, sickle cell, and other types of audacious treatments that have now just started to show that they actually work in humans. But it turns out our body is hardwired already to protect our DNA and to be able to help uncloak useful DNA and it's influenced by the food we eat. So the food we eat protects our DNA. And as we know, cancer is a disease with DNA mutations. And so this is where foods are really powerful methods, what we eat, to be able to actually protect our own genetic code and therefore protect us against cancer. And then finally, perhaps our most stunning health defense, our fifth health defense, is our immune system. Now, our immune system came from evolution. So if you go all the way back to, the most primitive animals known, you see that the immune system began way back at the dawn of life, at the beginning of life. And in fact, if you take a look at animals like sharks, which are quite prehistoric in terms of where they sit in evolution, sharks have a remarkable immune system to fight against multiple diseases, and they're really quite remarkable creatures. And so we have the modern human version of this. Now, as it turns out, our immune system defends us from invaders from inside the body, like cancer cells, but also defends us, obviously, from bacteria and viruses outside of the body. And there's also hardwired into our immune system, our immune defenses, the ability to have useful inflammation. And when our environment or our lifestyle causes that inflammation protective mechanisms to go out of control, it's like having a healthy fireplace that you are able to warm your feet by on a cold winter night, versus inflammation out of control is like the logs tumble out of your fireplace and start setting your carpet on fire and your curtains on fire. That is the type of situation that leads to chronic disease. And so our body has the ability to rein in inflammation and to raise the shields to protect us against invaders to our body. So these five health defenses come from my experience in in life sciences, in developing treatments, and of course, with regard to inflammation, immunity, the single most amazing biopharmaceutical advancement, I would say, in the last 100 years, by my reckoning, is the development of immunotherapy against cancer. And immunotherapy against cancer is not chemotherapy. It's a treatment that wakes up our own hardwired immune health defenses. And literally, when woken up, our immune system is capable of scrubbing out, dry erasing cancer so that it is gone, vanished from our body. In fact, you can take cancer patients with phase 4 disease, that's end stage, that's game over in past years, and we can actually scrub it away into a stage 0. So the impossible has become possible by harnessing our body's own health defenses. So these are the 5 health defenses.
Mhm.
I've worked on both the biopharmaceutical side. What gives me street cred when it actually comes to food is that because I've worked really on the rigorous hard sciences where people have invested billions of dollars, I've actually now been able to crank the turret away from the drugs to the food, to our gardens, to our markets, to our grocery stores, to be able to find out what hidden treasures for our health are all around us.
Absolutely. And the thing is that the pharma industry produces drugs that only work once the disease is there, and they tend to be expensive and very narrowly focused. So yeah, like doing it with food seems to be a much more flexible solution.
It's a kinder, gentler approach. So most of the health defenses in our body are part of our body's balance. And if anybody who has had exposure to medicine and healing in Asia, you know that really health and life itself is all about trying to navigate and try to maintain good balance in the body. It makes a lot of sense. There is a science to it. And our health defenses, the angiogenesis, stem cells, microbiome, DNA protection, and immune system, all function within a realm of balance. So, there's a fairy tale with Goldilocks and the 3 bears. The 3 bears are home invaders. They kick in the door. They look for, food and places to sleep and the tables. Well, think about it. They want the porridge to be not too hot and not too cold, the chairs to be not too hard and not too soft, etc. And it turns out our body's health defenses function exactly the same way. There's a Goldilocks zone of not too much circulation and not too few, not too many stem cells, not too few, not too much bacteria, not too few, not too much immunity, not too little. This zone of balance, which has been discussed for thousands of years, it's like second nature in Chinese medicine, for example, or Ayurvedic medicine, actually is now starting to rise into the sights of the scientific community, recognizing that, this is actually what we want to do if we can to maintain health. And unlike pharmaceuticals, which are aimed like rockets shooting at a target in wartime for disease, foods really are kinder and gentler, and they help the body keep things in that zone, that Goldilocks zone of balance, which is a much more compassionate, self-compassionate way of healing.
Would you see that your approach is kind of like mixing Chinese and Western medicine to come up with the best of both?
I am not a practitioner of Chinese medicine. I wasn't trained that way, but I have a
Right.
great deal of interest because my background is Chinese. And I'm a big believer in many Chinese healing, the herbs, the teas, the approaches to diet, the acupuncture, and acupressure. So
Mm.
I'm very open and accepting of philosophies and practices outside of what I was personally trained in. I was trained in America, to do Western, X, Y, and Z axis type of medicine. And I have to say, I've had to transcend my own training in order to be able to bring what I view as a more realistic, holistic, practical approach to medicine that is not only better for the individual, but I think more affordable for society. Because if all you have to do is take a look at the American healthcare system, the British healthcare system, and you can see that the cost of waiting to address health until you have disease, and then throwing everything you've got at it, is unsustainable, and it literally is crushing our healthcare systems, and it's making it untenable for us to be a healthy society. In fact, what we're winding up being is a sick society as opposed to a healthy society. And so it's a gigantic failure, I would say. The experiment of 20th century medicine and healthcare systems has proven that this system, while it can result in remarkable saves, I got to tell you, I have stories of patients that, we use technology, we use audacious medicines to bring them back from the brink. And they're alive and doing well today. But as a society, we really just can't be doing this. It's not fair. It's not accessible. And it's also it's not a reasonable approach for most people. So, that old saying of a ounce of prevention is a pound of cure, I would call it trillions of dollars of cure.
In the connection between nutrition and optimal hormone function, one mineral stands out. That is magnesium. It regulates hormones like insulin, thyroid hormone, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and cortisol. For example, a study with 399 men over 65 found that higher magnesium levels were linked to higher testosterone levels. Magnesium breakthrough from BiOptimizers is the only supplement that offers all 7 key forms of magnesium. This includes highly bioavailable forms like magnesium glycinate, malate, and orotate that raise cellular magnesium, supporting optimal hormone production and regulation. Since I started taking Magnesium Breakthrough, I feel more energized, my mood is more stable, and I've noticed improvements in other areas affected by hormone imbalances, such as sleep quality. If you want to try Magnesium Breakthrough, just go to bioptimizers.com/modern and enjoy 10% off with the code MODERN10. It comes with a 365-day money-back guarantee. And if you subscribe, you will ensure your monthly supply. Thank you for your support. So thinking of aging, all of the things that you talked about, the 5 things you talked about, they're all really important for aging and healthspan. But what I'd like to do is to kind of look at stem cells, because I see stem cells and regenerative medicine as one of the key arms that you would want to maintain as you get older. So could you spend a few minutes to talk about stem cells? I mean, what are they? Where do they come from? What are the main types?
Yeah, well, so most of us who hear the word stem cells think about, and this is sort of, there's medical tourism. There are these little strip malls in America where you can go if you have a bad elbow or a bad shoulder or a bad knee, and you can go and pay money, and somebody will inject somebody else's stem cells into you with the goal of actually healing. And they're honestly, sometimes it works. Honestly, sometimes it doesn't work and has terrible consequences. As I mentioned to you, I've been involved with major industrial efforts to try to produce stem cell therapy. There is one stem cell therapy that the medical community accepts and knows very, very well, which is that for treating cancer, sometimes we need to use treatments that basically obliterate your blood cells, and there's a stem cell transplant that can be given to resurrect your entire blood and red and white blood cell system to be able to actually help you survive the treatment that can be curative. Okay. However, you're mentioning something that's really even more promising. Regenerative medicine is something that our body's hardwired to do. Okay, so let's talk about stem cells. Stem cells are cells that are capable of forming any part of you. Could be your eye, could be your fingernail, could be your hair, could be your toe, could be your heart, could be your kidney, any part of you. It could be your nerves, muscles, bones. And these stem cells started at the very beginning of our existence, meaning when your dad's sperm met your mom's egg, okay, and they wound up creating a little ball of cells, primitive cells. You didn't have a face, didn't have arms or legs, no spinal cord. These were all stem cells that formed. And as they developed, as you developed in your mom's womb, these cells, these stem cells, started to take on a life of their own, following instructions that of what they were supposed to do. So some stem cells said, I'm going to become the eye, I'm going to become the jaw, I'm going to become the ear, and soon you actually had a face, so on and so forth to every single organ in the body. And when after 9 months, pretty much we're all formed and we're ready to come out of the birth canal and be born and ready to meet the world. Guess what? Our mother nature figured out that it's better to have an excess of stem cells in developing the little human in the womb. And so she gave us about 70 million extra stem cells, more than we need, right? You don't want to have less than you need. It's like painting a wall in your room and you don't buy enough paint and you're just about to finish the painting and you're missing an area. Like that's terrible, right? And like, oh man, I'm just done paint. So basically, what we have are 70 million extra stem cells. Most of them some of them are trapped in the umbilical cord. So if you've heard of stem cell harvesting at childbirth, that's actually squeezing out some of those extra cells that were us. But the rest of the cells that are trapped in the little baby's body, the infant's body, they go hide away like bees returning to their hive. Okay. They're in our bone marrow, they're in our body fat, they're in our skin. And these 70 million extra stem cells are basically our reservoir as we get older, when we're childhood, young adulthood, middle age. And yes, even when we're elderly, these stem cells are called into action following their instructions whenever our body needs to be repaired and regenerated from the inside out. So some people say, well, look, I know that salamanders regenerate, and I know that starfish can regenerate, but there's no evidence that humans can regenerate. And in fact, Richard, this is what I was taught in grade school by my teachers, right? Humans cannot regenerate. Unfortunately, we don't regenerate. You can't grow a new arm like a starfish. Well, that's true. We can't grow a new arm, but I will tell you how we do know that we regenerate. Our hair grows back, gets longer after a haircut. If we pull out hair, it'll grow back. We know our skin grows back. If you've ever had dandruff, that skin that's shed and new skin is underneath, it's regenerating. It's even more profound than that. If you injure your nerves and you kill your nerves in your arm, for example, your nerves will regenerate, grow back at 1 millimeter per day. It'll grow back amazingly, right? Which is why when you cut yourself, you might have a little numbness around there, but eventually you'll restore sensation for the most part because the nerves regenerate. Now, your gut regenerates pretty much every day, but some of your big organs can regenerate. If I took the liver, which is the largest organ in your body, and remove 2/3 of it, that 1/3 that will be left over the course of a few months to a year, the rest of the liver will regenerate, grow a new liver. If I cut off the tip of your lung, snip, all right, the tip of your lung will grow back. So our body's got the capability of regenerating. And what's exciting is that the foods that we eat can activate our stem cells, make more of them come out. And the reason this is important from a longevity perspective, from a vitality perspective, is because during aging, among many things that happen during aging, we get what's called stem cell exhaustion. Not only are the reservoirs depleted, there's less water in the well, so to speak, because it's been kicking out stem cells your whole life. So you got fewer stem cells, but the ones that are there are tired, exhausted. So there's two meanings to stem cell exhaustion. There's fewer stem cells as we get older into our the second or third chapters of our life, and the ones that are there are not as vigorous. And so foods as medicines can revitalize and repopulate our stem cells, which is pretty cool.
Yes. So I was going to talk about stem cell exhaustion, but so there's two things. So one is that you have this reservoir, and the other thing is you want to mobilize them. Now, is it the same food that protects the reservoir and also causes the mobilization, or are they kind of different things?
We're figuring that out now. This is sort of early days. We already know that it works, but it's early days to figure out the mechanisms. I mean, the question you just asked, is it mobilization? Is it protecting the reservoir? Is it filling up the reservoir? You've asked a scientific level question. This is the kind of stuff that myself and my colleagues working in the research world, we're having a cup of coffee, asking the questions, debating, designing experiments. So we don't know all the answers to this. And by the way, just so you know, and for your listeners and viewers, when you're talking to a real scientist, and I'm a real scientist, when a person says they don't know everything, okay? It's the real scientists very quickly confess what we don't know. We don't know the answer to what your question. We do know that some foods are really good at mobilization. A good example of that is dark chocolate. Now, dark chocolate's a food that most people enjoy. Bring when I give this answer, when people say, "What's your favorite food that can mobilize stem cells?" and I tell them the most dramatic one that I know of is dark chocolate. It always brings a smile to their face, right? Because who would have thought that chocolate would be good for you in this particular way? But it turns out that dark chocolate, which has a lot of cacao being the plant-based element, like it's a seed pod that grows in the tropics, that there's natural substances, natural chemicals called proanthocyanidins. Don't worry about the chemical name, just know that it's been identified. These, when you expose them to stem cells, it really causes the stem cell to act vigorously. It's like giving the stem cell a workout, okay? And when you actually feed humans dark chocolate, it actually mobilizes more stem cells into your bloodstream. Now, the stem cells come into your bloodstream by coming out from your bone marrow and other reservoirs. They fly out into your bloodstream like bees exiting in a hive. They buzz out, they're in your stem cells, they circulate all around where your blood goes. The amazing thing for stem cells is that they will only home into and fix the areas that need repair. If it's healthy, everything's good, everything's cool, they're not going to actually land there. But just like bees, they're attracted to a particular flower, they're only going to go to that flower. So stem cells are only going to go to the areas of injury or repair to be able to regenerate that. So this is quite remarkable.
Are there other, so can you give some other examples of foods which are, I guess, good for stem cells in terms of
Yeah,
either
okay.
mobilization
Okay,
or
so chocolate
yeah.
mobilizes.
Mm.
Black tea also mobilizes stem cells, as does green tea. So teas contain a natural substance, a polyphenol called catechins. One of them that has been best studied is called EGCG. I'm going to say it so that people go, don't say, oh, he didn't tell me what it is. It's epigallocatechin 3 gallate, EGCG. It's a polyphenol, all right? And it's present in tea. And when you brew a nice cup of green tea or black tea or oolong tea or pu'er tea, doesn't matter the type of tea you have, and you sip it, you are drinking that essence that emanates from the tea leaf. The polyphenols in the tea leaf, it gets into the brew at warm temperatures. It gets at hot temperatures. It gets into the water, the tea water, and then when you sip the tea, you're consuming this polyphenol. The polyphenol in the body acts to mobilize stem cells, whether it's black tea or green tea. And while I know that Asian cultures where tea originated will usually drink tea straight, I do know that in many parts of Europe, like in England, people love to put dairy, like milk or cream, into tea. An English tea in the afternoon with your tea, a little bit of milk, black tea and milk. And here's the thing. We've also learned that when you use dairy milk in tea, dairy being fat, right? There's dairy fat in cream and milk, that those fat bubbles in water, like tea water, form little mini bubbles. You can't see the bubbles, but they are there. Under the microscope, you can see them. They're chemical bubbles. And those little bubbles trap the polyphenol, all right, in tea. So when you put milk in tea and stir it around, you're forming little tiny bubbles, soap bubbles of the milk fat, and it's trapping those polyphenols. So when you drink the tea, the soap bubbles roll down your gut, so you're not absorbing as much of the polyphenol as you normally would. I would say you're probably missing out on 80% of the polyphenols from a cup of tea if you add milk in it. Now, this is true for dairy milk, but it's not true for nut milk. So soy milk, almond milk, all that kind of other kind of milks, those are fine. But the Asian way of drinking it is actually to get the full test. And if you really want to get like as much polyphenol, stem cell polyphenol as you possibly can, I recommend matcha tea, because matcha isn't just a steeped tea where, you put the tea leaves in a ball, or you take loose leaf teas and let them settle to the bottom of the cup. But matcha is the entire leaf ground up into a powder. So you get every bit of the polyphenol coming out into the cup of matcha tea that you would drink. It's really potent. So tea is another a substance that's actually good for um, stem cells. Another one, by the way, is I'm going to talk about multiple foods, but zeaxanthin and lutein are two compounds, two natural chemicals that are found in goji berries. Goji berries are sort of this Chinese medicine, herbal medicine type of thing. They're little tiny dried, ovoid looking things. They're sometimes found in Chinese teas, for example, but they're actually quite popular now as sort of a health supplement or a health food to eat. You can find goji berries snacking on them in different types of supermarkets that have a health oriented section. Lutein and zeaxanthin actually are present in goji berries, and they mobilize your stem cells. They protect your stem cells and they mobilize them as well. So this is an example of two substances that go hand in hand in both. Now, why is that really remarkable? Because they've been shown to help protect vision as we age. So think about it. You want to do healthy aging, right? In addition to the quantity of life you have, you want to have quality of life. And I would dare say that everyone would agree with me that if you want to have quality of life, you must have good vision. You can't be blind. If you're blind and you live to 180, that's not very fun. You're not going to, you're going to be trying to figure out how to read Braille with ancient hands. That's not going to be a good time. And so what's interesting is zeaxanthin and lutein, which is found in goji berries, also found in red bell peppers, for example, actually protect your stem cells. And interestingly, they've been shown to preserve vision in elderly people. They're good for protecting you against the condition called age-related macular degeneration, or AMD, which is the most common cause of blindness in developed countries. So here's another example of stem cells, I think, doing their job in the retina, in the back of your eye, helping to preserve your vision.
Excellent. So what are the kind of foods and lifestyles that do the opposite, that actually damp down or damage our stem cells, things that we should be avoiding apart from smoking?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Because, we all want to preserve our reservoir, and whenever our stem cells are needed, we certainly don't want to damage them or impair their function anyway. I mean, that would just be ridiculous, right? So, what are some of those foods that damage our stem cell, our body's own ability to regenerate? Well, I can tell you, this has been studied. If you have high blood sugar for long periods of time, hyperglycemia, okay, which happens with metabolic syndrome, which happens in diabetes, type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes, uncontrolled diabetes, right? This is one of the most common metabolic disorders is hyperglycemia, because we live in a world with overconsumption. Pretty much everywhere in the world that has good access to food, people are overeating. Added sugars, sodas, you wind up having high levels of blood sugar. I'm going to leave insulin out of the equation for the moment, but let's just say that your blood sugar is built up, right? And you go to the doctor, they draw blood and they do a blood test, and you've got high blood sugar, high fasting blood sugar, or you've got insulin insensitivity, glucose intolerance. You look at hemoglobin A1C, which is another blood test that is done commonly to check out how well your body is managing sugar. Oh, your hemoglobin A1C is very high. These are just common lab tests in a doctor's office. That means that your blood sugar is elevated. High blood sugar basically makes your stem cells punch drunk. All right. It impairs their function. If you think about the normal stem cells as sort of like let's say a Olympic swimmer doing a crawl stroke, swimming as fast as they can, like a missile through the water, a torpedo through the water. That's what normal stem cells would be like. Now, if you put them in a high glucose environment, okay, now that's actually like making the swimming pool jello and actually tying a lead weight onto their shoes. And now they're flopping through this medium, this high sugar medium, and that's what high sugar does. So high sugar, anything added sugars, all those things that would lead to metabolic syndrome or type 2 diabetes in particular, that condition and those foods would actually impair stem cell function. Now, it takes time to really damage your metabolism to that level, but it's very common. Number two, another food that actually damages stem cells is a high salt environment. So people who are hypertensive, who eat a lot of salt, and as we get older, we have to really watch the amount of salt intake because our system is very sensitive to salt. And we want good blood pressure. We just don't want too much blood pressure. It's the silent killer, hypertension, the greatest cause of stroke. All right. And it turns out that high salt environments are also really damaging the stem cell function. They just don't work so well. Okay. It's kind of like that swimming pool, substitute the jello with, something else, mud, and now the stem cells aren't working so well. So high sugar, high salt environments are not good. High cholesterol in the blood, high triglycerides also are stunning to stem cells. So stem cells are now swimming through, trying to swim through quicksand. Not so easy, right? So high salt, high sugar, high fat environments, all the foods that would contribute to as such, right? Those would be impairing the stem cells. Now, there are some other categories that we do know are bad for stem cells. For example, ultra-processed foods. Ultra-processed foods are bad for pretty much every area of health that they've been studied, but I will tell you, for stem cells, they're terrible. All right. Now, what's an ultra-processed food? It's something you go to the grocery store, in the market, and it's found in a box, it's found in a tin, it's found in a bag. But the telltale sign, the tell of an ultra-processed food is if you look at the ingredient label, which most governments force their food manufacturers to have an ingredient disclosure. What's in the bag? All right. And I think all health savvy consumers now are beginning to look at that. I tell everyone that I speak to, please look at the ingredients on the side of whatever you're buying. If it's fresh, there's no ingredients because it's a fresh whole food. But anything else, please look at the side and read those ingredients. Ultra processed foods tend to have 20 or more ingredients in them. Most of them are very complicated Greek words or Latin words, scientific words you can't pronounce, and you have no idea what they're there for, what the role they play in the food. And a kind of a shorthand I always say is that if you took a look at the ingredient label and your grandmother wouldn't know what to do with some of those ingredients that are listed, the chemicals, that's probably ultra processed. Ultra processed foods are very damaging for stem cell function, both for the reservoir of the stem cells as well as for the mobilization and the homing to where they need to go. It really is damaging the stem cells at every level. And not surprisingly, we know that ultra processed foods are involved with, are linked to many chronic diseases where, actually you would want your stem cells to be in good shape to be able to provide that healing that you're going to need.
Yes. Yeah. So you mentioned some papers actually in the book, and you talk about a measure for stem cells, like the number of circulating stem cells in the blood, right? So is that the best way? So how would you measure your stem cell health? Is that the best way? I mean, is there a commercial test that we could get that done?
Yeah, this is I have a lot of colleagues who are biohackers, and they're always interested in knowing so you're talking about stem cells and, the number of cells per milliliter of blood. Where do I go to get that test? Well, here's the thing. I know where to get the test because it's an experimental test originally developed in the lab to measure stem cells in animals. It's applied to humans in an experimental level to be able to actually see how well the experiments and the clinical trials are doing, but not yet prime time, sort of from a commercial base to measure stem cells. And here's the thing. Stem cells are pretty difficult to detect. Now, 70 million stem cells sounds like a lot. Yeah, I ought to be able to detect 7 million, just give me a magnifying glass and I'll find them. Look, that's 70 million within 40 trillion cells in your body. So indeed, it takes a very, very sensitive test to be able to pick up cells that are in such small quantities. And most of those stem cells that are actually in your body, most of the 70 million are hiding out in your bone marrow. You won't find them in the blood. So this is, infinitesimally small. They're small but mighty, hard to detect. You need special magnetic beads to be able to pick them up. And this is not readily available for commercial testing. So anybody watching this, if somebody's telling you that they've got a special stem cell test, I would double check to make sure. Eventually we will have it. Right now, to my knowledge, there isn't really the level of testing that we use in these clinical trials that do actually measure stem cells. So basically, what's a good surrogate? What's a good replacement or a substitute marker? Well, look, I think that the desired function of the organ or the tissue that you're trying to repair is the best way. Look, for that dark chocolate study, this is the study done at the University of California, San Francisco. They took 60-year-old men who had problems with their circulation. Their blood pressure was high. Their resiliency of their blood vessels was poor. You could measure that. And what they did is they measured the subjects at the beginning before having dark chocolate, hot cocoa. And they measured their blood pressure. What they did is they blew up their blood pressure cuff. They used an ultrasound probe and they measured when you release the blood pressure cuff after blowing it up, how quickly does the blood rebound into go past the cuff into the system, into the arm. You can measure that. That's called flow mediated dilation. It's a measure. Again, not commonly available, but it's measurable in the clinic. And that's a readout. If you want to look at other functions that are readout, I would say, maybe arm grip strength would be a good readout. I would say if you're looking at pulmonary capacity, a standard lung function test you can measure in the doctor's office. There's not a lot of things that you could actually do with a wearable yet. So for people that are really interested in doing it, I would say most of the tests that reflect the improved function we're looking for is going to actually be in the clinic. Heart, how do you know your heart's doing better? Well, squeeze function of the heart. This is ejection fraction. That's a cardiac ultrasound you need to do. So I would say, this is engineered in evolution, stem cell repair, to be so back of the shop, silent, happening all the time, that it's not a front of the shop stuff that's easily measured. But you got to trust me as a scientist. I can tell you we're able to measure them as the clinical trials are measuring it, and the output, whether it's vision, whether it's cognitive function, whether it's respiratory or lung capacity, whether it's muscle strength, squeeze strength, whether it's rebound or resilience to your blood vessels, we're finding that it actually works.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I can certainly see that it is difficult to detect them or measure them. So I wanted to touch briefly on angiogenesis, which is like one of your core things. In fact, I think where you kind of started in this journey. And that seems more complicated because it's really about the balance, right? You've got to have not too much and not too little. Could you talk a little bit about angiogenesis and the importance of it?
Yeah. Okay. So angiogenesis sounds like a complicated word, but it's pretty simple. Angio, blood vessel, genesis, how they grow. Angiogenesis is how blood vessels grow, how your body grows its own blood vessels and maintain its own blood vessels. And what we're talking about is your circulation. So what's remarkable is that we now know that the human body, the human adult, has 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels kind of woven into every part of the body under the skin. These are the highways and byways that deliver the oxygen that we breathe and the nutrients that we eat to every single organ in the body, which means that it's delivering these critical nutrients to our cells as well. So our blood vessels, angiogenesis, is critical for respiration, oxygenation, breathing. It's important for nutrition, food we eat. And by the way, it's important for medication as well. whether you're injecting a medicine into your bloodstream or whether you're swallowing a pill or taking a syrup, got to go through your bloodstream to get to where it needs to go. So that's really the fundamental importance of our circulation. So important that, again, going back to when we were developing in our mom's womb, dad's sperm met mom's egg, everything at the beginning. So I like to sort of set that at the beginning. That's the beginning of us. The first tissue, the first organ that gets laid down is our circulation, without which nothing else could actually survive. Don't form the liver, don't form the face first, form the blood vessels first, because without blood vessels, nothing's going to make it. Nothing's going to survive. So our circulation is the very, very first thing that occurs after an egg is fertilized in the womb. So these blood vessels are part and parcel to our health. And as we're developing and as we age, as we get into our elderly years, again, we're talking about lifespan and health span, we rely on our blood vessels. If our blood vessels are healthy, we have a chance of having optimal health. But if our blood vessels are sick or impaired in some way, no chance that you're going to be optimizing your health. So anybody who wants to, aim for optimizing health, I want to be as healthy as I can. Work on your blood vessels. You got to work on your blood vessels, because if those blood vessels aren't healthy, everything else is going to be compromised. So what is blood vessel health? Well, think about your blood vessels as a tube. A garden hose, perhaps, would be a great example. It's pretty thick. So if you were to cut the garden hose in half and look at it head on, it's got a wall and it's got a hollow space in the middle. And the water that you're going to water your lawn goes right through the middle. All right. Now, if that garden hose is allowing the water to flow smoothly, you're in good shape. You're going to be able to water your lawn, you water your flowers, your garden's going to look beautiful, no problem. But imagine that sludge, mud, gets into that hose, and the opening gets narrow. Water is going to now dribble out and not flow out. Okay. And now you're not going to be able to water the garden in the same way. The garden is not going to grow so well. And similarly, blockages in our arteries and veins, mostly our arteries, but blockages in our blood vessels, our arteries, actually narrow blood flow. This is the underlying cause of the number one killer in modern countries, modern civilization, cardiovascular disease, almost universally accompanied by narrowing of those blood vessels. All right. And by the way, people go, well, the cardiologist can do a roto-rooter. We can remove that plaque, or we can put a stent in there and blow it back up. Look, this is happening everywhere in your body. If it's happening near your heart, you're in trouble. You might be having chest pain. You might have a heart attack. If it's happening to your brain, you're going to have vascular dementia, and we can't get in there and put a stent in the brain very easily. It's happening in your penis. All right, you're going to have erectile dysfunction. If it's happening in your muscles, you're going to be weaker. So again, the healthier blood vessels is absolutely vital. And this is really what I began my journey, as you said, as a scientist studying angiogenesis, how the body grows and maintains healthy blood vessels, not too many, not too few, but just the right amount. And with that right amount, they've got to function perfectly.
Right. And so there's foods that can kind of promote angiogenesis, and there's foods that can kind of tamp it down. And it kind of depends whether, so it seems like whether you need to grow more because you're fixing injuries, or you want to tamp it down because you may have concerns about cancer. Would that be
Yep.
summary?
Let's talk about this balance. Having the right amount of blood vessels is absolutely critical for your health. I think we've established that. Now, what happens if you don't have enough blood vessels? Well, if you don't have enough blood vessels, the area that is missing those blood vessels are going to be poorly nourished. They're not going to have enough oxygen. They're not going to have nutrients. They're not going to have enough survival factors. And what happens in areas of poor blood flow? Well, they don't function that well. They may function. Eventually, the tissue will die. All right. That's the ultimate thing. When you have a heart attack, you've got a blockage, sudden blockage of the blood vessel. Nothing gets past it. That heart tissue beyond that can't breathe. It literally dies. That's a heart attack, and you wind up having dead heart tissue. Same thing in the brain with a stroke. So if you have a wound, by the way, cut yourself with a knife in the kitchen, scrape your knee playing tennis or riding a bike, falling off a bike, a scab will form. That wound needs to heal. When it's healing, it needs new blood vessels to repair that area that's been damaged. Now, think about it. If you've ever had a scab, when you were a kid, the crusty part on top of a wound on your knee, for example, and that scab came off too early, it happens. What's underneath there? Bright red blood area, a bright red area that actually are angiogenic blood vessels growing, trying to repair and heal that area. Okay. And so blood vessels are critical for healing. So when you don't have enough blood vessels, let's say the heart is narrowed, not blocked yet, but getting narrowed, your body desperately tries to grow new blood vessels to bring better blood vessels into the space. If you have a stroke, actually the first thing your brain does is it goes into panic emergency mode to try to grow blood vessels around the blockage. All right. It tries to do it. All right. It needs to do it better, but it tries to do it. Same thing for a wound. The moment you have an injury, you turn on the switch for angiogenesis to grow more blood vessels to heal that space. So if you can't do it well enough because you've got diabetes or you've got cardiovascular disease, well, it turns out that foods can actually help to coax along repair of the circulation. So some of those foods, barley is one of the foods. Barley, which is a whole grain, actually contains a natural substance called beta-D-glucan. Beta-D-glucan is a natural substance that stimulates blood vessel growth. It helps coax new blood vessels to grow where they need to go. And by the way, the remarkable thing about the body's own ability for angiogenesis is that when there's enough blood vessels growing, once there's enough, it stops automatically. Doesn't matter, even if you give it more, if you eat more barley, it's not going to overgrow it. All right. It's kind of like a lawn, if you're in a country club with a beautiful golf course and the lawn is beautiful and you've got a bulb patch in the lawn, you can put more grass seed in, more grass will grow. But if it tries to grow too high, the grass, what happens? Landscaper, grounds caretaker, take a lawnmower and mow over that extra lawn, and it's now perfect. It's what the body does when you use food. Now, I will tell you, foods cannot overgrow blood vessels because it helps the body in balance. Drugs can overgrow blood vessels if you allow them to. All right, because drugs are powerful. Drugs are the sledgehammer approach, as opposed to the kind of the kinder, gentler approach we talked about. So that would be in this situation where you'd want to grow blood vessels. Other blood vessels growing things are including fruits. And with fruits, it's also the fruit peel. So an apple can actually contains chlorogenic acid, which can grow blood vessels. But the peel of an apple peel contains something called ursolic acid. And anybody who wants to learn more about these specific substances and specific foods, you can actually come to get my books, because I put tables of these foods in there and identify exactly what's in them. Ursolic acid is found in fruit peel, apple peel, apricot peel, peach peel, pear peel, and that ursolic acid stimulates blood vessel growth in order to be able to help coax more blood vessels to where it needs to grow. So this is quite an exciting thing. Oh, by the way, there was a study done by Chinese researchers looking at Chinese sea bass. So it's not just plant-based foods. And it turns out that there is a peptide, a substance in the flesh of fish. Now, sea bass in Asia is often cooked. You don't make fish and chips with sea bass in Asia. What do? They cook it in a healthy way. They steam it, and then they put soy and ginger and all kinds of other things on it, right? It'd be like the Cantonese steamed fish. Well, it turns out that black sea bass, when you cook it in that way, actually preserves a protein in it. And they've actually the researchers steamed the sea bass, then dried it, into a husk, powderized it, and purified the protein. And they've studied it. And in the flesh of steamed sea bass is a angiogenesis stimulating wound healing substance that actually can promote healing. Amazing, right? So this is an area of research that is, I would say, there's enough data to know that this is a real field. We're still at the exciting early days of discovery, where we're finding more foods and we're understanding more about how they actually work. And so it's a great time if anybody's interested in pursuing a scientific career to get into this field. I always tell young people who ask me for mentorship, if they're trying to do research or trying to go into medicine, I would say, stem cell biology, is and angiogenesis, super exciting, particularly for in the area of longevity. We need blood vessels to be able to age well. Blood vessels in the brain, again, the most common cause of dementia, cognitive impairment, is problems with our blood flow. Our brain highly depends on good blood vessels. And so angiogenesis stimulating compounds for the brain are really important. Oh, by the way, one last thing I'll tell you about blood vessels for healing is that not only do you want more blood vessels, not do you want blood vessels that are open and for blood flow, but you also want blood vessels that are dilated. You want them to be able to be as wide as possible to allow blood flow to go as clearly as possible. Now, turns out we already know how important that is with a drug called Viagra. Viagra is a medicine used to treat erectile dysfunction in men. And erectile dysfunction is where blood vessels are, you can't trap enough blood in the penis, and so the penis is unable to maintain an erection. Viagra works by causing the blood vessels to dilate. And so then more blood goes through. Turns out what's good in the penis is actually good for the brain as well. And recent studies have shown that sildenafil, which is the medicine, I don't get paid by any of the drug companies for anything I say, or any product, frankly, that the sildenafil, the drug Viagra, actually has been shown now to decrease the risk of dementia quite significantly by about 70%, actually, in men who take Viagra on a regular basis. And so this is a discovery. Now, okay, so I'm certainly not telling people to go out to rush out to get Viagra. It's a medicine, it requires prescription, doctor supervision. But what kind of food is medicine application can we have for foods that can help blood vessels dilate in healthy ways? Turns out two: beetroot, and spinach. Spinach can do it. Both of them are low growing, grow close to the ground. Both of them pick up a lot of nitrate from the soil. Good, healthy soil contains nitrates. Those nitrates, nitrogen, okay, you want to grow a garden, you want to grow a vegetable garden, you need good nitrates in the soil. That's healthy. That's like healthy agriculture, healthy gardens, healthy growing. Need nitrogen. Beets and spinach pick up healthy nitrogen from the soil. And when you chew the beets, the cooked beets or the spinach, and you really want to chew it, which is why you want to cook it in delicious ways. You want to be able to savor your food, not just pop it down the hatch. You want to chew it. It turns out that your tongue microbiome, bacteria and healthy bacteria on your tongue. Yep, they grow. Your tongue is filled with healthy bacteria. When they contact the nitrogen in the beets or spinach because you're chewing it, there's a chemical reaction between the bacteria and that nitrogen to convert the nitrogen into a form that when you swallow it down the hatch finally, the nitrogen's absorbed in your bloodstream in a form that turns into nitric oxide. Nitric oxide causes blood vessels to dilate, just like Viagra does. Okay. And beets and spinach are a way to actually help you have better blood flow to the brain, to the heart, to your lungs, to your muscles, every part of your body. And we know this because if you measure blood pressure after you have somebody eating spinach or drinking beetroot juice, for example, you'll see their blood pressure going down. Blood vessels are dilated, blood pressure comes down a little bit. In fact, some people can even think about using this as an approach to come down in their dose of blood pressure medicine or potentially even come off their blood pressure medicine, depending on what's the cause of their hypertension or a cause of their high blood pressure. So diet, food is medicine, powerful. This is all acting on the circulation, and you asked me to explain why it's so important. But all these ways, and on all these ways that foods can actually influence how our blood vessels actually grow.
Okay, so a few questions at the end. So I saw in the book there are, so you looked at like for each one of the five, like foods that helped. And there are a number of foods that appear in multiple categories, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I was going to ask you, what are your top three foods or drinks for longevity that would have the best overall effect? Which would you pick?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I have my own personal favorites, and I also have knowledge of what these foods do. So keep in mind that I'm expressing a mix, a blend of my scientific knowledge and my clinical knowledge with my personal preferences. And that, by the way, this is what everybody should be doing.
Right.
Food and longevity and enjoyment of life, highly personal. All right. And so you're asking me a question I'm going to answer in a very personal way, based on what I know, of course. So I will tell you that I'm going to lump them into one category because they take up two. Tea and coffee, all right,
Mhm.
are two longevity beverages that also activate your body's health defenses. I call them grand slammers. In American baseball, grand slammers, where a person who is hitting the ball hits the ball so far that everybody on the bases can run in and score points, including the batter. That's a grand slam. It's a euphemism that's used to talk about something that's so amazing. It hits all the targets. And this is and tea and coffee together as beverages are grand slammers. They help angiogenesis, stem cells, microbiome, DNA repair, and also your immunity and inflammation system. They're beneficial. That's one food. And by the way, they slow down the cellular process of cellular aging. They slow down how fast our cells age, and they right size our metabolism. And when you take a look at the blood characteristics of people who are super agers, what's a super ager? Somebody who's gets to 90 or 100. Those are super agers. 100-year centenarians are super agers. Look at their blood versus looking at somebody, younger person's blood. The difference between a super ager is that they have better metabolic path. If you compare super agers to people who die at an earlier age, metabolism is out of whack in the younger people. Metabolism intact in older people. So tea and coffee also help your metabolism. They help burn extra body fat. They lower inflammation. Tea and coffee would be one of my foods. I'm cheating by right out of the gate by lumping two of them together. All right, because I personally drink tea in the morning and I drink tea at night. So that's my beverage cycle. Second, I would say are beans, legumes. Okay. White beans, black beans, pinto beans, lentils, chickpeas, you name it. These are all kind of legumes that are kind of the bean family. All right. Red beans, azuki beans, for example, in Asia are very popular. And the beans all contain dietary fiber. All right. They also contain minerals and vitamins, but they contain dietary fiber. Beans, the dietary fiber, actually feeds our gut microbiome, feeds our healthy gut bacteria. When our healthy gut bacteria is well fed, the gut bacteria release substances called short chain fatty acids into our blood that lowers inflammation. And all of the chronic diseases that steal and rob us of that long longevity are inflammatory diseases. So you want to live long, you want to counter the forces that rob you of those extra years, and that's by lowering inflammation. Beans do that, okay, by feeding the gut microbiome, but beans do something else. They also are filling. So they trigger satiety, meaning the feeling of fullness. So we tend not to overeat. So if you eat beans for lunch, guarantee you're not going to eat as much dinner, no matter what. You're just not going to be quite as hungry. And that's important because when we overeat, we flood our metabolism and we wind up building extra body fat, and that body fat's inflammatory. So here's another way of actually controlling our metabolism. Beans actually work in multiple ways. So beverage, beans. I would say the third food that I really, really think is beneficial are brassica. That's a whole category of greens. Broccoli would be a great example. Kale would be another kind of typical healthy example. But let's talk about some other interesting brassica, Swiss chard, bok choy, lots of different arugula. These are all other cauliflower. These are all other interesting ways of actually having greens that are brassica that contain sulforaphanes, isothiocyanates. These are chemical. When you eat a nice, beautifully cooked green, it has a kind of a interesting sulfury taste to it, slight plant-like taste. That is actually from the sulforaphanes. And those are powerful in protecting your DNA against aging. They are powerful in boosting your immune system. They're immune boosting. And by the way, as a footnote, I'll tell you, somewhere out there in the internet world, in the social media world, there are people spewing complete nonsense to say isothiocyanates and broccoli they contain anti-nutrients. For the record, on your podcast, I'm going to tell you there is no such thing as an anti-nutrient. That is some crazy word made up by somebody who may have good intentions, but and probably pretty creative, but there's no scientific basis for an anti-nutrient. Foods, whole foods, they all have nutrients and they are good for you. There's nothing that actually counters the nutrient. All right. Now, so brassica would be the third category, and there's many more, but I would tell
Hmm.
you that coffee, tea, the beans, which are a big category, and the brassica, I could actually make any of those categories. I could whip up a tasty dish, and they're easy to cook. By the way, they don't require a lot of time. They're inexpensive. They're seasonal. At least the greens are. And then, by the way, if I had to sneak in one more food, because I cheated at the beginning, I'll cheat at the end. I'll sneak one more food in. I would say it's tomatoes. I love tomatoes. Tomatoes are a fruit. They
Hmm.
contain lycopene. Tomatoes, the lycopene in tomatoes and eating tomatoes have been shown in clinical studies to lower the risk of prostate cancer and of breast cancer in population studies. And the lycopene protects your DNA. So if you're somebody who likes to go out in the sun to get some sun at the beach, if you have tomato juice or tomato salad, that lycopene will protect you from ultraviolet radiation damage to your DNA from the inside out. It's like sunscreen from inside your body. Still apply sunscreen outside your body, but if you want to protect yourself from the inside out, tomatoes are one of them. And by the way, tomatoes contain lycopene, but also so does watermelon. So a cool watermelon drink on a hot day, that's a way of getting lycopene, which makes both tomatoes and watermelon juice red. Those are actually protective ways as well. So longevity, lifespan, protect your body, activate your health defenses, get your metabolism in better shape. These are just some of the ways that you can actually help to achieve not just longer living, but better living along the way.
So one last question. Would you be able to share your protocol for health? I mean, what do you think about in terms of, or how do you think about your own diet, and do you do any fasting?
Yeah. Okay. So let me try to summarize how I approach this in a simple way. First of all, um, uh, everyone's personal and everyone's style of achieving health is very personal. Before we got onto the podcast, we were talking about Bruce Lee, whose own form of martial arts was revolutionary because he had no style. He incorporated the best pieces of all the styles to be able to practice his art and his fighting method more efficiently. Okay. So he adapted himself to the circumstance. And literally, and I read about this in my book, Eat to Beat Your Diet, which is my most recent book. There's a whole section about how Bruce Lee's philosophy actually makes a lot of sense for personalized nutrition and personalized health, which is we are born with everything we need to be as healthy for as long as we're going to live. Now, it's our environment and our own daily practices that thwart us, they shorten our life and compromise our well-being. So if we want to actually be as healthy as we can, we've got to make things work for us, given our own circumstances. This is sort of like the mixed martial arts way of actually being healthy. So I will tell you I use diet to maintain healthy. I'm very mindful of what I eat. I think ahead about what I'm going to eat, what do I want to eat, and I think about the things that would please me because you should be able to love your food, and enjoy your health at the same time. So I'm conscious of that every time I make a food choice. I don't have time to go through my whole algorithm of how I think about every food choice that I make. There's hundreds of foods that are out there, but I sort of figure out like, what would I want to have for lunch, or what would I want to have for dinner tonight? I take a little bit of a bon vivant kind of approach to things, like what would make me happy, what would taste great for me? And then I sort of think about like, all right, well, if I want Swiss chard, if I want some vegetables, I think I want Swiss chard. Or I want or bok choy saute with some oyster sauce or some garlic. I'll think about that ahead of time. I'll literally be mindful. I don't just wait until the trough is filled, like in a farm for a farm animal. I think deliberately about what I'm going to have for dinner. And I think that in many cultures, whether you're talking about Mediterranean culture or Asian culture, people wake up in the day looking forward to what they're going to eat in the night. They talk about it, right? And so I think this is something I actually do. But I also think that in addition to diet, I also think consciously about my lifestyle. I try to stay in motion. You know,
Mhm.
uh, people say exercise is important. It absolutely is. People want to go to the gym and get a trainer. Expensive, not accessible for everyone, and not practical for everyone. I don't think you need a trainer, and you don't need to go to the gym, and you don't need to train for a marathon, but stay physically active. Walk at least 30 minutes every single day. That's your baseline. You can keep up walking 30 minutes a day, even when you have a walker when you're in your 90s. Okay. And you certainly can do it when you're younger, and you can do it when you're busy, when you can do it when you're not so busy. That's something that is a habit I think is really good to get into at a younger age, because that's something you can do. Listen, put on some earbuds, listen to your podcast, listen to some music, or no podcast, enjoy the outdoors, meditate, use walking as a process of meditation, getting your head in touch with your environment. That's really important. Lowering stress, which exercise can do, is very, very important. I also think about sleep. Sleep is really important. Most people don't realize, because you asked about fasting, when you are sleeping, you are fasting. Fasting just means not eating. When I'm sleeping and when you're sleeping, you're not eating. We're fasting. So fasting is a state in which our body's metabolism naturally shifts gears from what we do during the daytime when we're awake. When we're awake, we're eating food. We're eating food, our metabolism goes, all right, we're not going to be burning down extra energy. We're not going to burn fat. We're going to load up on our energy and store it in our fat. But when we finish eating at night, put our dishes away, we're not going to eat again. All right. And then we go to sleep. When we're sleeping, our body senses, oh, no more food coming in. Insulin levels go down. Like a race car, your body shifts gears, and now you pull into the fast lane. When you're sleeping, your metabolism goes into fast gear to burn down extra body fat. So every night when you're sleeping, you're actually burning fat. You're not exercising, you're burning fat. All right, it's amazing how this metabolism works. So I think about how much sleep I'm getting. We know we should get between 7 and 9 hours of sleep. That's how this 8-hour magic number comes in. But it's true. 8 hours of sleep on average allows you to have enough time to have your metabolism shifted into fast mode, fast gear, to be able to burn down extra body fat. Look, it's not practical for everyone every time, even for me, to get 8 hours of sleep, but you should aim to do it, meaning that you shouldn't actually try deliberately to live a life where you're shortening your sleep to the smallest amount possible. All right. And napping doesn't make up for it, because your metabolism isn't shifting gears when you're just taking a nap during a day. So I would say my diet, my physical activity, and my sleep are three ways, the kind of three legs of the stool that I always think about. And the fourth one, of course, is really social connection. If you take a look at how every long-lived person in the world, in these so-called blue zones, or any super ager, they will tell you that one of the, and you'll see by research, one of the common denominators is that they have a social circle. They're connected. They have a sense of purpose with their community. They're funny. They've got a sense of humor. They're not curmudgeons who don't like others, who just have no sense of humor at all. Those people, evolution kind of wipes them off the face of the earth, sooner rather than later. We want, a planet of people who are pleasant, who are contributing, who feel like they're a member of a growing dynamic community. And I think that these things are I keep all these things in mind as every single day. And these are parts of the protocol. And I'm sorry I didn't give you sort of like I do 5 things, X, Y, and Z. I think, the mixed martial arts, the Bruce Lee way of doing this, is actually a lot more adaptive, and it uses more tools. And I adapt it to wherever I am. If I'm on vacation, if I'm at work, if I'm in the city, if I'm in the countryside, it's all different. But I use this sort of same approach to be able to stay agile, to adapt to my surroundings along the same direction.
Yes, that makes absolute sense. And yeah, I love the way you are so flexible in the way you think about food and thing. Otherwise we get into these diet wars, and it's like, well, no, you have to do this, and it really doesn't work. Okay, thank you so much. So we touched on some of the foods, but yeah, your books have all the detail about all the foods and what's in each one, and how it works in each case. And so, yeah, I kind of encourage anyone who wants to dive into the detail to do that, because we definitely didn't have time. We only just to scrape the surface today.
Yeah. And I by the way, if anybody who really wants to learn more, I'm actually putting out a ferocious amount of new content about food and medicine, and many of these topics we're talking about on my YouTube channel. So Dr. William Li, Dr. William Li, Li. Come onto YouTube. You can watch all the stuff. I'm putting out new videos pretty much every day for with little nuggets of things that people are asking me that they're interested in. So, I welcome people to put their comments down and subscribe.
Anywhere else? So you have a website?
I got a website. It's Dr. William Li, drwilliamlee.li.com. And I'm also on social. If you want to see my Instagram, TikTok, I'm on Facebook. I'm on there. Again, my handle is at Dr. William Li. I periodically offer master classes. I teach an online course that actually does a deep dive into your health defenses. So if you really feel like it's time in your life to kind of make real meaningful change, you want to commit to it, I take people on a month-long journey with me. And you can find out all about it when I do these free master classes. And I start talking about the reason I teach the course and what's in the course, and give a lot of information away just in terms of like practical things that I do for everyday health.
Excellent. Thank you. We will link to those in the description. So, Dr. Li, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciated the conversation.
Thank you.